The village of Stow-on-the-Wall is located at the highest elevation in the Cotswolds and at the junction of three major roads. The town goes back to Saxon times. This square was the site of an Iron Age fort and then a Roman garrison town. An international fair began here in the year 1107. It centered on the wool industry. As many as 20,000 sheep were sold in a single day. Today, the square has a myriad of shops around it, but the old stocks where the bad boys of the town were punished still reminds us of a time when there were consequences for bad behavior. In the 1600s, the King's Arm was the premium lodging on the road between London and Birmingham. Charles I was said to have eaten here before one of his battles with Cromwell's forces. The Market Cross has reminded merchants to trade fairly for over 500 years. At its base is a plaque commemorating the Royalist defeat here during the English Civil War. Dating back to 947, the Porch House is reputed to be the oldest inn in England. In the days of the wool trade, sheep were herded down these narrow alleys, single file, so that they could be counted by the buyers. St. Edward's Church dates from Saxon times, but the current building was erected in the 15th century. After a Civil War battle that ended in Market Square, more than 1,000 prisoners were held in this church. A plaque on the right-hand wall of the church commemorates the 50 men of the village who lost their lives in World War I. These kneeling pads are made by a group of local women who meet each Tuesday morning to do the needlepoint and enjoy a cup of coffee. This stained glass window tells the biblical story of the rich man and Lazarus. This door on the back side of the church may have been Tolkien's inspiration for the door into Moria. He hiked this area numerous times. St. Edward's Hall, that serves as the City Hall, Library, and TI, was built in 1870 from funds in an unclaimed bank account. We purchased pastries for a snack later in the day at this bakery that is said to supply Buckingham Palace with some of its delicious treats. Market Hall was constructed in 1627 by Sir Baptist Hicks, who was a leading wool merchant in the area. An American attempted to buy it in 1940, but the townspeople raised money to buy it first, and then donated the building to the National Trust. The roof timbers inside are true to the original design. The stone roof is held together with wooden pegs. This technique is still used today in the Cotswolds. Adjacent to the Market Hall is a limestone disc marking one end of the Cotswold Way, a 100-mile path leading to Bath. The Green Dragon House is marked by black cast-iron fixtures that once held hay for horses in the stables. The main Dragon town is called High Street. The finest houses are on the uphill side, but you will find no house numbers on any of the buildings. William Greville, a sheep merchant, built this first stone house in 1367. The small Ernest Wilson Memorial Garden is filled with plants he brought back from travels in Asia during Victorian times. Little remains of the huge Baptist Hicks estate. The mansion and most of its buildings were destroyed in the Civil War by Cromwell's forces. St. James's Church is one of the finest perpendicular Gothic churches in the Cotswolds. Built from the profits of the wool trade, it contains the graves of many of the wool merchants from this area. The elaborate canopied tomb of Baptist Hicks and his wife Elizabeth are the main attraction in this church. Leaving Chipping Camden, we drove to Stratford-upon-Avon. Our first stop was the Holy Trinity Church, where Shakespeare was buried upon his death in 1616. There is also a first edition printing of the King James Bible on display in the church. We also stopped briefly at Anne Hathaway's house just outside of town. We had a wonderful meal at the thoroughly British Windmill Inn pub. That evening, we enjoyed a performance of Antony and Cleopatra at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre before heading back to our bed and breakfast.